My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm the head of compliance at a mid-sized investment firm in downtown Chicago. And on most days, I'm the kind of person who keeps her heels dry, her schedule tight, and her emotions closer than her wallet. But that afternoon, everything changed because of a woman I'd never seen before, standing on the corner of Lexington and Fifth, cradling a crying baby in the pouring rain. She looked like she'd just been pulled from a storm drain. Her hair was plastered to her cheeks, her clothes soaked straight through, and she was bouncing the baby on her hip, like she was trying not to fall apart. Cars sped past, splashing dirty water across the curb, and people walked by, pretending not to notice her. I should have done the same. That's what the smart version of me, the version trained by years in finance, would have done. But all I saw was a young mother drowning on the sidewalk, and I couldn't look away. When I approached, she looked startled, like maybe she expected me to yell or call security. I asked if she was okay. She said something about her daycare falling through, about a report due in 2 hours, about just needing somewhere dry for 20 minutes to print and regroup. Her voice cracked mid-sentence. The baby wailed, and I felt a tug in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was because I'd been there once too. I had my daughter Lucy when I was 22 and interning at a bank that didn't allow strollers in the lobby. I remembered hiding diapers in my purse and pretending every emergency was just food poisoning. So I did what no one did for me. I gave her my access badge, told her to use my office, and even handed over my spare key in case she needed to step out and lock the door. She stared at me like I was handing her the moon. I told her to take her time, use my computer if she needed to, and that there were snacks in the top drawer. She nodded, blinking back tears, and whispered that she wouldn't forget this. I smiled and told her it was nothing. Just one woman helping another. I went off to a late lunch with a client, feeling like maybe for once I'd done something good that mattered, that maybe the world needed more kindness and less suspicion. By the time I walked back to the office, the rain had started again. I remember thinking how proud I was of that moment. I'd extended trust when it would have been easier to ignore her. It made me feel human in a world where we're trained to be guarded. I had no idea I'd just handed my career, my reputation, and everything I'd built to a stranger with a baby, and a story I never verified. But in that moment, I wasn't a VP or a watchdog. I was just Rachel, a woman who saw someone struggling and decided not to walk away. I didn't know yet that kindness in the wrong hands could become a loaded gun pointed straight back at you. That came later. I stepped into my office and froze. At first, I thought maybe someone had broken in. Maybe security had made a mistake. My papers were scattered across the desk drawers, cracked open like someone had been searching for something specific, and my laptop screen glowed in the dim light, unlocked and humming. It took my brain a full 5 seconds to register what I was seeing. Then my eyes landed on the email thread open on the screen. My name, my account, my signature at the bottom of a message sent to every partner and executive at the firm. Subject line: unauthorized transfers and embezzlement concerns. I moved closer in slow motion, my breath locked in my chest. The email accused me of funneling money through shell accounts and manipulating our reporting software to hide discrepancies. Attached were financial documents I had compiled over the last year, the ones I'd been quietly collecting to build a case against our CEO. Only now they had been doctored, twisted, flipped to paint me as the villain. I reached for the mouse with a trembling hand and clicked through the attachments. Every number was close to accurate, but just wrong enough to bury me. Details had been altered surgically. The formatting was mine. The tone, the structure, even the file names. It looked like my work because it was. Only now it was poison. My phone buzzed violently in my bag. I yanked it out to see 20 missed calls and over 30 messages. Some were from coworkers, others from unknown numbers. All of them asked the same thing. What did you do? The hallway outside my door was quiet, almost too quiet. I could feel something building, something heavy and permanent. My knees buckled slightly as I sat in my chair, heart slamming against my ribs. The screen refreshed on its own. Another email this time to our external auditors copying legal counsel. I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, coming closer. My phone buzzed again. A single message from our head of security. Don't leave. We need to talk. That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a breach. This was a trap, and I'd walked straight into it with my heart wide open and my guard all the way down. I sat there staring at my screen, the weight of it all pressing down until it was hard to breathe. Every file I'd worked on, every late night I'd spent building a case against him, had been stripped of truth and turned into a weapon pointed at me. My meticulous documentation had been repackaged to make me look like the thief, the manipulator, the one lining her pockets while smiling in meetings. I knew the numbers. I knew the patterns. That's what made it worse. This wasn't some sloppy frame job. It was precise. Someone had studied my work and used it against me with surgical control. I had no idea who that intern really was or how she got past our systems, but she hadn't acted alone. Someone with power, someone who knew how I operated, had orchestrated this. My office phone rang and I answered out of instinct. It was Grant. His voice was smooth, almost amused, like this was all some unfortunate misunderstanding. He said security was coming up and that I should stay calm, not make a scene. Then his tone shifted. He told me I should have kept my head down, that I should have known better than to dig through places I didn't belong. It hit me like a slap. He knew. He'd known all along what I was doing. The late-night audits, the flagged anomalies, the private folders. He hadn't just found out. He had waited. Watched. Let me do the work so he could twist it back on me when the time was right. And the intern, she wasn't some random new hire. She was bait. A prop in a performance written to destroy me. She'd played her part perfectly, right down to the desperate eyes and damp baby blanket. My chest felt hollow. Everything I'd done with the belief that truth would protect me had been undone in a single afternoon. I wasn't the whistleblower anymore. I was the cautionary tale. The woman who flew too close to the fire was burned. No one would care that I meant well. In the eyes of the firm, I was already guilty. The perfect scapegoat. And Grant. He was already erasing me one file, one conversation, one lie at a time. They didn't give me time to collect myself. One moment, I was staring at my laptop in disbelief, and the next two members of the security team were standing in my doorway, asking me to come with them. I tried to ask questions to explain, but they wouldn't meet my eyes. They didn't have to say anything. The look said it all. I was already guilty in their minds. They walked me out through the main floor. Everyone stared. A few whispered behind their monitors. Some didn't bother hiding it. I kept my head up, but inside I was crumbling. The silence in the elevator felt louder than the storm outside. The building I'd worked so hard to rise through had just spit me out like nothing. By the time I got home, the news had already broken. A headline blared across the top of a finance blog calling me a disgraced executive, caught siphoning millions through fake vendors. There was even a grainy photo of me entering the building that morning, umbrella in hand, like some kind of villain in a noir film. I didn't know who had leaked it or how fast the story spread, but within hours, it was everywhere. Then the banks came. First, it was an email saying my account was temporarily frozen pending investigation. Then came the blocked credit cards, the declined payments, and the notification from my landlord suggesting it might be best to vacate quietly at the end of the month. They didn't want trouble. No one ever does. I tried to call HR Legal and even Grant. No one answered. My work email was deactivated by nightfall. When I called the front desk the next morning, they said I was no longer in the employee directory. Just like that, 15 years erased. But nothing hurt like the call from my daughter. Lucy was in her junior year at Northwestern. When she finally called, her voice was tight, distant. She asked if it was true, if I'd done it. I told her no, that everything was a lie. But the hesitation in her silence broke something in me I didn't know was still intact. She said people had started asking questions at school, that her roommate had seen the story online, that she didn't know what to believe anymore. I wanted to scream that I raised her better than this, that she knew who I was. But all I said was, "I'm sorry." And then she hung up. After that, I stopped answering the phone. I didn't have anything left to say. There was no job to save, no reputation to defend. The world had already moved on. I was yesterday's scandal. Another name in a long list of people who fell hard and didn't get back up. I sat on the floor that night staring at the wall of my apartment like it might offer an answer. Nothing came. Just silence and the growing sense that I had become invisible, not just fired, not just accused, but erased. And somehow that was the part that hurt most. Something changed the morning I woke up and didn't cry. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden spark of inspiration, just a quiet awareness that the grief had exhausted itself, and in its place was something colder, steadier, not hope, not yet, but focus. I made a cup of instant coffee in the dark and sat at the kitchen counter going through what little cash I had left. Credit was gone, accounts were locked, but I found $73 in bills and some spare change in a kitchen drawer. Enough for groceries. Or maybe something more useful. I opened my laptop and created a new resume under my maiden name. No mention of Skyward. No trace of titles, leadership, or years in high finance. Just basic bookkeeping experience, low-level quiet. I applied to 10 listings within the hour. By the next afternoon, I had a reply. The restaurant was a family-owned Italian place, tucked into a strip mall 30 minutes outside the city. They needed someone to handle invoices, balance the books, and occasionally help with prep. I took the job without hesitation. It paid cash, no background checks, no questions asked. By day, I chopped vegetables, filed receipts, and ran numbers on a battered calculator. At night, I stayed up with a second-hand laptop, combing through every public document Skyward had ever filed. I created timelines, linked financial disclosures with market movements, and tracked patterns. It was slow, meticulous work, but it kept my mind busy and my instincts sharp. I stopped using my real name anywhere. No social media, no contacts, no LinkedIn. I dyed my hair dark and lost 10 pounds without trying. On paper, I no longer existed, and that suited me just fine. They thought they'd buried me, thought I'd disappear humiliated, silent. But I knew something they didn't. You don't erase a woman like me without consequences. I built my career on patterns, on data, on precision. I'd spent 15 years spotting things others missed, and now I had nothing but time. This wasn't revenge for the sake of pride. It wasn't about getting my job back or making them feel what I'd felt. This was about truth, about justice, about taking back control of the narrative they'd stolen from me. The first step was patience. The second, information. The third, well, I hadn't gotten that far yet, but something told me when the moment came I'd be ready. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage to reach out to Naomi. She had been my assistant for 4 years, sharp, loyal, and observant. If anyone had seen what was happening behind closed doors, it would be her. I didn't send a message. Too risky. Instead, I waited outside a coffee shop 2 towns over, the kind of place without security cameras or regulars. I hadn't told her what the meeting was about, only that I needed 15 minutes and absolute discretion. She showed up 10 minutes late, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, fingers fidgeting with her sleeves like she was debating whether to turn and leave. She slid into the booth across from me without a word. I could see the hesitation in her posture, the fear of being seen, of being connected to someone the company had so thoroughly disowned. But when I said one sentence, he used me to protect himself, her whole face changed. She looked down, took a breath, and reached into her coat pocket. What she gave me wasn't much, at least not at first glance. A flash drive. A handful of printed emails. Notes from internal meetings she'd typed but never sent. But buried in those files were names, timestamps, and one detail that made my skin go cold. The intern wasn't random. Her name was Tessa Clark, recent finance grad, and Grant's wife's half-sister. Naomi leaned in and whispered that she hadn't told anyone else, that since I left, things had gotten worse. Closed-door meetings, financial reports that didn't make sense. People are getting promoted out of nowhere. Whispers of bonuses tied to numbers no one understood. She said she couldn't prove anything, but that she'd seen enough to know something was deeply wrong. Before she left, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "You were right." Then she stood up and walked away like we'd never met. I walked out with the flash drive clenched in my hand, heart pounding harder than it had in weeks. It wasn't enough to clear my name, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall. And all I needed was a crack. It started with a photo, buried deep in Naomi's files, scanned from a holiday newsletter someone had forwarded around the office years ago. In the corner, standing next to Grant's wife, was a younger woman, holding a wine glass and flashing the same shy smile I remembered from that rainy afternoon. I stared at the image for almost a minute before my brain caught up. The hair was different. The makeup was subtle. But the face was the same. The intern, the one I had trusted with my keys, my office, and unknowingly my downfall, wasn't just some desperate new hire. She was family. Tessa Clark, the half-sister of Grant's wife, was strategically planted in the company under a fake title with a fake backstory. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was orchestration. She hadn't just stumbled into my life with a baby and a sad story. She'd been chosen, trained, and sent in like a weapon with lipstick and lullabies. I had offered her shelter, and she had set fire to my entire life. I pulled everything I had on her, which wasn't much. Her social accounts were wiped. Her LinkedIn was newly created. Even her college records were light. But there were slips. A tagged photo here. A mention in an old alumni newsletter there. She wasn't an intern. She'd graduated with honors in finance and interned at a hedge fund in D.C. 2 summers ago. It was all too perfect, too polished. And suddenly everything made sense. The way she knew exactly what to say. The way she moved through my files was like she understood them. The perfume I couldn't place. It was the same one Grant's wife wore. I remembered smelling it in the elevator once back when I was still allowed to be part of the world. Tessa wasn't just helping Grant. She was building something for herself. Maybe it was power, maybe revenge, maybe both. But I knew that look in her eyes now, the one I missed before. It wasn't fear, it was a calculation. And worst of all, I knew she wasn't done. I told myself I had one shot. No backup, no second chances, though. If anything went wrong, I'd go to jail. Or worse, I'd vanish for good and no one would care. The penthouse was quiet when I stepped off the service elevator, balancing a tray of wine glasses in a black vest 2 sizes too small. The security guard barely looked at me. I kept my eyes down and walked like I belonged, heart pounding so loud I thought someone might hear it echo down the hall. I reached the study in under a minute. Grant's laptop was still open on his desk. The room smelled like leather whiskey and power. I pulled the keylogger from my pocket with shaking fingers, small enough to fit behind the USB hub, undetectable, unless you were looking for it. I slipped it into place, logged in using credentials Naomi had helped me recover, and started the script. I had 60 seconds. Maybe less. Then the door creaked behind me. I didn't turn around, not right away. I just froze. My mind scrambled through excuses, backup lies, anything that would buy me time. When I finally looked over my shoulder, it was her. Tessa, standing in the doorway like a ghost that had stepped out of my worst nightmare. Her hair was longer now. No baby in her arms, no rain in her eyes, just a quiet stare that didn't match the tension boiling in my chest. I waited for her to scream, to press a button, to blow everything. But she didn't move. We stood there, locked in a silence that stretched too long. Then slowly she closed the door behind her and leaned against the frame like she'd been expecting me. She didn't say a word, just watched. I turned back to the laptop and pulled the tray closer to block the view. The device was in. The script was running. But now everything had changed. If she didn't report me, it meant something. Either she wanted me to win, or she was saving me for a later move. And I had no idea which was worse. The boardroom looked exactly like I remembered it. Long glass table, mahogany panels, a view of the skyline that used to thrill me. I stood behind the one-way mirror in the adjoining conference room, heart steady, hands still. Naomi sat at the table with the flash drive I had given her, waiting for my signal. Inside, Grant was speaking with his usual confidence, laying out projections, smoothing over quarterly discrepancies, like he always did. Talia sat to his left, calm and polished, in her role as chief risk officer. No one suspected a thing. Not yet. Naomi tapped the keyboard. The screen behind Grant flickered, then lit up with a familiar login window. A beat passed. The room went silent. Then the first video played. It was Grant, sitting in his penthouse, dictating an email about shifting numbers before an audit. The audio was clear. His voice is unmistakable. Then came Tessa's voice, asking how long until I cracked. He laughed, said I was never supposed to survive the first blow. The room erupted. People stood. Chairs scraped the floor. One of the board members demanded to know what was going on. Thalia froze her face, draining of color. Grant reached for the keyboard, but Naomi locked the controls remotely. Then the second video played. This one showed Tessa using my login, transferring files, editing spreadsheets, cutting me out line by line with surgical detail. It was irrefutable. Security entered first. 2 men in suits. Then the officers. Real ones this time. They walked in quietly and placed both Grant and Thalia under arrest. No shouting, no scene. Just the calm precision of justice arriving exactly on time. I watched it all from behind the glass. No applause, no dramatic music. Just the cold, quiet satisfaction of truth breaking the surface. My name wasn't cleared with confetti. It was cleared with evidence, timing, and the help of someone who still believed in me. As they led Grant out in cuffs, he looked up for just a second. I met his eyes. Didn't smile, didn't blink. Just let him see what it looked like when a woman he underestimated refused to stay buried. The board offered me my job back before the dust had even settled. They called it a gesture of goodwill. Said they were sorry that they believed in redemption. I smiled politely, thanked them for their concern, and told them no. Some doors once slammed shut should stay that way. Instead, I accepted a settlement. Not out of forgiveness, but because I knew how to turn silence into leverage. They wanted this buried, and I let them believe I would walk away quietly. But deep down, I knew I wasn't walking away. I was walking forward. They cleared my name in the press. The story changed from scandal to sabotage, from disgrace to survival. My face was no longer on finance blogs with shame headlines. Now it was paired with words like resilience, courage, and comeback. None of it mattered to me. What mattered came on a Tuesday evening when my phone lit up with Lucy's name. She didn't cry. She just said she was sorry. Said she should have known better, that she'd been scared. That maybe she didn't want to believe her world could turn upside down so fast. I told her I understood, and I meant it. She asked if I'd be okay. I told her I already was. That night, I stood by the window of my new apartment overlooking the river. No penthouse view. No nameplate on a door. Just quiet. I opened my laptop and typed one final command into the console I'd been building for weeks. A timed trigger. 1 click. The next morning, every shareholder in the firm received a file. So did Grant's wife. It included bank records, private messages, and recordings. All of it was tied to the last layer they hadn't uncovered. Things even the board hadn't dared to look at. My parting gift. Not for revenge, but for truth. For every woman who had ever been silenced, betrayed, erased. Then I closed the laptop, poured myself a glass of wine, and watched the sky turn gray before dawn. I didn't feel rage or pride, just peace. The kind that comes when you've faced the fire and walked through it with your soul intact. They had tried to end my story, but all they really did was give me a new beginning.